Hey everyone, welcome back to the Wealth Preservation Podcast. We have Mr. Andrew Henderson back with us from Nomad Capitalist. Andrew, how's it going?
Great to be with you. Doing well.
Perfect. And I always have my co-host Josh Saunders. Today we are meeting from across the globe. Josh, how is everything going in Texas?
So we're here recording in way South Texas, and Mark, you're there in California, and Andrew's sitting there drinking his morning. I'm drinking my evening water. Andrew's drinking his morning tea there in Kuala Lumpur. So it's a worldwide podcast today.
Yes,
very cool stuff.
Yeah,
glad to be with you. Glad to be part of it.
Yeah. So for those of you that didn't or haven't listened to the first episode we did with Andrew and the Nomad Capitalist, please make sure you go back and hit up that episode. He talked about his entrepreneurial journey, how he grew up in Cleveland and kind of became this citizen of the world, and kind of what he does and how he got to where where Nomad Capitalist is today. And he lives this stuff, right? This isn't just an idea he came up with and did read a couple of magazines and put a business together. I mean, he lives this stuff, eats, breathes, sleeps, and does this on a daily basis. So any advice he gives, I'm sure he has either done it himself or knows people that have, and he just doesn't make this stuff up. So we're really, really excited to have you here, Andrew. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Awesome.
First, let's talk about Nomad Capitalist and what you guys do, what your services are, and just kind of, if people are going to your site, what are they what are they looking for? What are they finding?
Well, again, the 5 magic words are go where you're treated best. And that applies to people's money. It applies to where they live. It applies to where they invest. And my philosophy is you have a lot of Western countries to become brand names, like the United States, like the UK. People want to go there. People that I meet from Nicaragua or from all sorts of countries around the world, they think that that's the path to success. I talk to people who are already successful and are tired of being abused, and they want to go where they're treated best. And so as a lifetime entrepreneur, we talked last time how I slinked out of a party school after 1 year in university. I do not have the fancy words that people in the Big Four use where they couch things and you don't even know what it is. You go to my website, you just see, you're paying too much. And yeah, it can help. And so it's a little brash, but we do a couple of things. It's simple, right? People want to know what it is. Enough, fancy word. I mean, for me, 15 years old, I remember getting, always doing well in English class, and I always wanted to use fancy words. You get into the business world, nobody wants the big fancy words, right?
Nope.
So we do a couple things. Number one is financial planning in the sense of how do you lower your taxes overseas? It's not as simple as incorporating in the British Virgin Islands and staying where you are. You have to follow what I call my tax-friendly quadrant. Your company needs to leave. You need to leave. You need to go somewhere, both you and your company. Okay, how do you do that? Where do you go? They don't have to be the same place, by the way. The company can be in one place and you can be in a different place or places. But how do you handle lowering your taxes by going offshore? We dispel those myths. Where do you bank overseas? It may be a requirement, depending on where you're from, to move your banking out of your country. It's not generally for Americans. But if you want to diversify your money into other currencies, other countries, other banks, asset protection, things like that, that's the whole financial picture for you and your business. Then there's the picture of where you're going to live. Number one, it helps with your taxes. We want to find tax-friendly places to live. We want to find places with more freedom where they leave you alone. I believe that is available in spades outside of the West. Where's your second residence permit? You can get a residence permit to live somewhere. Do you need to get a second citizenship as an insurance policy against what's happening in your country in case you ever need to get out? Some Americans, because the U.S. has this unique policy of worldwide taxation, you could lower your taxes overseas as an American, but you're always responsible to file, and there's always regulations and rules that are constantly changing. Some people want to get a second citizenship and just bail on the U.S. entirely to be out of that and have more freedom. And then we also talk about investing, and so we look at markets like Cambodia, Georgia, Colombia that I think have a lot of potential. Some of them could be a rockier ride than others, but I think offer higher yields, higher appreciation, fewer regulations, lower taxes than developed markets people are investing in, whether it's real estate, stocks, bonds, business investments, et cetera. So those are the three things. And just to summarize, they can work together. A property you buy overseas to diversify your cash out of dollars into a different country, into a different currency as a hedge can also help you get a second residence permit or a second passport. Living in that country, they might have a tax exemption that you can go and live, and they can all work together, or they can all screw each other up. And so we kind of take an approach of global and holistic because what works on the U.S. tax side may not work in Hong Kong. They have to work well together, basically.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, kind of how did you develop that skill set? I mean, because that is, that's taken. There's people that spend an entire lifetime just trying to learn the U.S. tax code, right, and the U.S. Legal system. Now you're basically learning, all these different ones. So, kind of how does that all mesh together?
Well, I do focus on a relatively niche group of people. We work with 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs. So anyone from you're making $500,000 a year selling, Shopify courses to you're a 9 or 10-figure person with an exit, or you're running a big business. So we've done everything in between, but our basic thing is helping primarily people from the West diversify out of the West. So, I do have some knowledge of how to get back into the U.S. because people who renounce their citizenship want to know how to get a tourist visa, for example. But I'm not the expert on U.S. immigration, right? I'm focusing on a very niche part of how do you leave these countries? What's the tax policies in each of those main countries? Where do you go? And I've spent 13 years building a network of suppliers, and now more recently building a team that is building, I think, one of the largest research libraries of this stuff that's constantly being updated. We're constantly getting new intelligence. And obviously, I do not know the answer to every tiny detailed question. I know all the macro stuff and a lot of the detailed stuff, but occasionally we have to rely on that network of suppliers that have worked for us and we've relied on for years to come in and clarify, here's a unique situation, what's the scoop on this? And so I think in a very opaque world outside of the West, where it's a lot harder to find good people, it's a lot harder to do deals, that's been what I've spent, all these years developing.
Gotcha. And life is a lot about who you know, and that's a super valuable asset to have, just to have those connections of people that are going to, treat you well.
Different overseas, right? Because, there's no Zillow in most of the countries. There's a great website in Serbia someone developed. Maybe they're a fan of ours because I've been saying this is the idea. Start a real estate website. There's a website in Serbia called City Expert. It's the most beautiful real estate website you've seen outside of the U.S. There's some sites in Malaysia. But even the countries like Malaysia that are more developed, you have a lot of kind of scammy or inaccurate listings. And so the kind of data that you have in the Western world simply doesn't exist in these other countries. Mm-hmm. Okay. Great opportunity for a lot of investors or entrepreneurs. But it also means that you need to know what you're doing.
Right. So heads up to any data scientists who are listening who want to, hey, we may want to get you connected with Mr. Henderson here. Might have some investment opportunities for, real estate websites in other countries. Is that, you think that'd be hot?
I think it's an incredible opportunity. I've been talking for years about the country of Georgia, for example, and you can go and buy a property. There's no property taxes for people who don't live there. It costs $17 to transfer a title. It's one of the most free, countries for protecting property rights. The sixth easiest country in the world to do business now, thanks to President Mikhail Saakashvili, who started this. He's speaking at our live event we're having next year. We've kind of become buddies in a sense. And he totally revolutionized the place, and nobody's ever heard of it. And so the culture has yet to catch up with the fact that they have all these investors coming. I've had numerous people, hundreds of people probably, write me, stop me in the street, whatever. I came to buy a property, and yet it's so opaque. And if someone only started a website that made it easy, a fraction of Zillow, that person would have an incredible business.
Yeah. Hey, just for the record, I do know something about Georgia. They have a great rugby team, so I do know that.
Yes, they do. The Olympics, it's always the wrestlers, I think.
And they have great wrestlers too. That's exactly right. Yeah.
We're kind of splitting hairs here between rugby and wrestlers. They got the same body type.
It's very similar.
Real quick before we move on too, because this is like just super interesting. This is something that we have said a few times in past episodes, and it's nothing that we came up with. It's something that is repeated by many of our guests, which is, if you want to grow your wealth, protecting it first, being tax smart second, and then knowing where to put it third is kind of the hierarchy of needs. And so often I think where people get backwards is they're trying to just look at like, hey, where can I go put money and make it grow? And they're not thinking like, hey, an 8% taxable growth is not near as sexy as 20% tax savings. Right. And so, it seems like you're doing this on a global scale where you're like, hey, we got to protect what you have. Stop. It's tough to re-earn a dollar. Then let's be tax smart. And now let's go see where you should be putting, where you should be diversifying your money.
Well, there's a couple things that come to mind. I remember there is definitely a mindset shift when you do this. I don't make decisions based on how do I get money off my books. I make smart business decisions, and I'm very proud we invest in we're going to have about 30 team members at the end of this year, paying wages that maybe aren't, amazing wages in the U.S., but I can tell you are more than amazing where these people live, and they're thrilled, and we retain people, and it's been a great process. And so I'm really proud of operating people in some of those places, opportunities where in some cases unemployment rates are much higher. But I can tell you, I'm making business decisions not based on how do I jam in some marketing on December 31st to write it off. And that's a paradigm shift of going, because I hear so many people who their business keeps growing too quickly and they eventually run out of steam and they kind of give up because they run out of deductions to stop the high tax rates from creeping up on them as the business grows 50 or 100% year over year. And so I think that a paradigm shift is in order. In terms of tax savings, if you look at, doubling a penny every day, and you do that, today it's a penny, tomorrow it's 2 cents, after a month, it's something like $5.3 million. If you take out a 30% withholding tax, it's somewhere in the mid 5 figures.
Yeah.
And so I look at that and I look at entrepreneurs. I have a guy right now, he's 23 years old. He's running a $1 million a year business. I said, what happens if you just run that overseas until you're 30 and you're able to save $400,000? You're putting that back into the Facebook ads. You're putting that back into the business. Over the next 7 years, that's generational wealth. Mm-hmm. That's potentially tens of millions of dollars by 30. And it just goes to show all these people that think they should take 40 or 50% of your wealth. I don't think these people would be calling me if the tax rate was Montenegro, 9%. Mm-hmm. Yep. If you're making $10 million and they're taking $1 million, okay, maybe you're interested in doing something. But by and large, I think a lot of people realize, we're willing to pay for something, but it's become so egregious.
Yep.
That people are saying, 58% as an entrepreneur in California, I'm out.
Yeah, it's hard. Right? Absolutely. Yeah. Those dollars are hard enough to make.
Yeah.
Let alone remaking the tax. So, yeah.
And not even to get a thank you. I mean, the culture in the Western world today is so anti-wealth, and you're a villain. And I've had more calls than ever before from people who say, I just don't feel like I'm needed. I don't feel like I'm wanted. I feel like I am the enemy. And I don't want to hire 30 of those people. I can tell you that.
Yeah. Sure. I mean, because, also you got to deal with the employees that are just like, well, I mean, he's the business owner. He clearly is flush with cash. He should just give me a raise. I mean, I'm worth it, right? I mean, there's also that kind of that mentality too.
That exists everywhere, but, at least it's not, there's different cultures, and it's not this visceral hatred where I'm from.
Yeah. So about that paradigm shift, change is kind of scary, right, for a lot of people and changing how they do things. So what's probably the scariest thing for people to switch over to the Nomad Capitalist way?
Well, I mean, the first thing with the Nomad Capitalist way, you don't have to necessarily move. I've had a lot of people who are concerned with the direction of the country, and they're saying, you know what, let me get a second passport in a low-tax country like in Antigua, for example, where you can just invest and you don't even have to go there. And so that's my plan B. It's my backup plan. It's my escape hatch. You can do that, and you can open a bank account somewhere else, and you can make some investments somewhere else, and you can move your IRA overseas without leaving home, and you're still putting yourself substantially above everybody else. Mm-hmm. I don't know when the last time a bank in Singapore failed, but it was a lot before the last time a bank in the U.S. failed. So you're really not going to hurt yourself by simply taking some diversification measures. But the hardest thing, if you're actually moving overseas and getting the full tax savings as a business owner, is, of course, understanding the idea that the place that you're from is not the be-all and the end-all. And it's not number one in everything, let alone possibly anything. If you look at the statistics on just the United States, for example, during the Great Recession, which is when you would think you'd want financial security, banks in the U.S. by one account came in at the 40th safest in the world. I don't know how many Americans can name 39 other countries, let alone 39 others with safer banks. And so, that's kind of shocking, right? U.S. passport. We have the Nomad passport next. We put it every year. It's been in Bloomberg and CNN and all over the place. We ranked the U.S. passport, I believe, 37th. Now, there's 200, so it's not like the worst. It's not Iran, but there's a lot of passports that are better. Romanian. Yeah. A lot of passports that people would laugh at. I remember turning on CNBC, years ago, and they were talking about how they wanted to raise the price for the U.S. green card program through EB-5. And they were laughing how Malta was more expensive. Malta charges more. First of all, Malta gives you instant citizenship. You don't have to live there and turn over your entire financial life to the IRS for 5 years and have them snoop in every bank account you have anywhere in the world. Malta just gives you the citizenship for the higher price. But Malta's in the European Union. You can live and work anywhere. If you leave Malta, they don't tax you. They don't care what you're doing. And this idea that where you're from is somehow better than everybody else is something that people in the Western world have. And yet I go around all these emerging world countries, and they are really cleaning up. Malaysia, where I spent some time, has an objective by 2030 to be at the same standard of wealth as any European country. And quite frankly, they're already beating a lot of countries in the European Union in terms of things like GDP per capita. So the countries that people are just working hard and not obsessing over their image. And I think if you're in a country where they are obsessing over their image and you've bought into the Kool-Aid, that's going to make it very difficult. I think once you clear through that, you will realize, you know what? Living in Mexico City is pretty nice. And it's relatively safe in the right neighborhoods. And you'll start to make these realizations.
It sounds a little crazy, like, Andrew. I mean, you're telling me that if you leave people alone, give them freedom, and don't overtax them and just let them grow and work hard and let the entrepreneurial spirit, just rise, that people can handle themselves. That seems a lot outlandish to me. I don't know. I don't know if I'm buying that.
Well, I mean, the masses, they certainly like to do that. I mean, the crabs in a bucket philosophy works everywhere. But I think you have to get past that if you want to really achieve something. And, I talk about, again, let's keep on the topic of Malaysia. I see so many. I'll make a video on what happens if Joe Biden gets elected on YouTube, or I'll make a video about Joe Biden's tax plan. And I'll make one comment about how, your life's not going to really change that much. Let's be honest. Whoever's president. That's an entrepreneurial thought, right? You're in charge. You dictate. Okay, your taxes are going to be higher. No doubt. I'm here. I'm with you. They're going to be higher anyway eventually. Don't worry. But all the Trump voters then come out, the Fox News crowd. I have nothing against these people, but they come out, and I'm a communist suddenly. I mean, the name of the channel is Nomad Cap. He's a communist. I know what he's up to. And this is a culture that, even the people that are supposed to be on your side, you can't get along with. And
I mean, you're Ohio born and raised. I mean, you turned your back against the Midwest of America.
Well, I'm a traitor,
well, Andrew, I think somebody did try and start the Nomad Communist website and service. That just didn't work very well. They tried, and it just wasn't a go.
We did that on April 1st, the Nomad Communist.
Maybe because they had a place where you could pay money, but then they never sent you anything, and so eventually you were paying.
I mean, so where were we? I mean, I just look at you've got to get past this idea that people talk about in Malaysia, for example. They're extreme. Somebody said, I don't like it because you can't buy alcohol and you can't share a hotel room with your girlfriend. I said, I just walked outside. I said, there are girls with everything hanging out, and I just bought a bottle of Macallan. So this is just ridiculous. And this is what people think. So they justify themselves. Mm-hmm. The level of freedom. I had American guy, moved down from California to Mexico. He's been there about 5 years. He said, there's not really the same constitution here. There's not this, there's not that. He said, but the feeling, the reality, the day-to-day is you are more free. You're certainly more free in many of these countries from a tax perspective. They're much less confiscatory. They're not trying to invent more ways. I talked about the country of Georgia. When Mikhail Saakashvili, our friend, came in and he slashed taxes, the number of taxes from 21 to 6, then to 5. He flattened pretty much all of them or put very narrow bands, some of the lowest tax rates you'll find. And he made it so where you had to have a constitutional amendment to change some of them. And so that's not happening in the Western world. And yet people want to act it because they have a constitution that nobody follows, that somehow that's freedom. Politicians are politicians. And I think you want to go where the real freedom is. And going back to the financial point of view, if you are a successful business owner, I promise you can find a place that's just as free that will let you keep a lot more of your money. And by the way, the roads will be have you been to Dubai and driven on the roads? They're impeccable. Yeah. Any of these places, even the Georgias of the world, even parts of Ukraine, even parts of countries that are just not doing that well have said, we're going to make an investment in nice airports, nice roads. My last time I was in the U.S., I was in JFK. The place is collapsing.
Yeah. It's not a great airport. I've flown out there many times. It is not an amazing airport.
So kind of back to your search. So I guess if someone comes to you with a clean slate, like what's your initial process for just finding because obviously you're not just gonna do like a one size fits all, to anyone who calls you up. What's your first initial question when you're asking people just to get to know you questions and finding a direction for them?
Well, I mean, the first question is basically just what brings you in. I like to hear from people and just go through a whole just listen and just active listening, and people say things and you pick up on it. And I think that what I like about your show, and obviously you look at a lot of these podcasts, for example, it's just like a list of questions. And it's like, so where did you get your start in life? It's like, well, I murdered my neighbor when I was 11 years old, and I disposed of, and they're like, all right, question number 2. And it's like, no, you have to go with the flow. And so there's not really a list of questions to start. It's what are you trying to accomplish? And then what we'll do is we'll say, okay, let's set 3 macro goals. And then, okay, let's poke and let's prod against those a little bit. It's kind of like a doctor, get on the table, take off your clothes, and I'm going to start poking at things and seeing where it hurts and seeing, where we go from there. What are the 3 macro goals? And then from there, we've got a repository. We've saved probably 600 different questions that we'll pull out, and we will adapt, and we'll switch up, and sometimes we'll add additional questions to that. And so I might ask you 200 questions over the course of a whole engagement. My philosophy on this is, I was talking to guys who are in the citizenship by investment business recently. This is the Antigua example. You donate money to their country, you get a passport. You don't need to live there. You don't need to go there. You don't need to pay taxes. You don't need to do anything. They are small islands. And for $100,000, you can be a citizen in 6 months. It's called citizenship by investment. There's a whole business of these guys that mostly serve non-Westerners who want better travel documents. Whereas I'm helping people get second passports to potentially bail from their countries when the taxes get too high. Mm-hmm. They're doing it to Chinese or Russians or whatever. And basically you go into most of their offices and it is, here's 6 countries we sell. Which one do you want? And it's so disingenuous to me because I had a guy recently who he wanted to renounce his U.S. citizenship, but he thought his wife had to also. I said, no, she doesn't. She breathed a sigh of relief. And then I said, okay, well, now we can go to the cheaper citizenship by investment. So we already saved you $30,000. Mm-hmm. And then I said, well, let's go through the whole thing. Turns out his mother is from an Asian country. He can get citizenship there. He may not have to pay any money at all because he wants to live in Asia. So the Asian passport works very well for what he wants to do. And, $130,000 saved by going through all these questions about citizenship, about his U.S. taxes, about all these different things. And that's the point. It all has to work together. Sure. And I think that so many things there's a lawyer in Panama. I can tell you, he ain't recommending that you incorporate in Malta. Right. And I think that far too many people, they're always looking for what's the best? There is no best.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. Because the rules are always changing. Life's always changing. The governments are always changing. Yeah. So, and I think,
if I may, I think what you want to understand, by the way, is you want to compartmentalize. Okay. So people will come to me and say, here's the biggest misconception. Andrew, you said you love Georgia, so start a company there. No. I said you can open a bank account there pretty easily, even as an American, as a tourist. I think there's opportunities in the market. I think it's an interesting place to live. They have nice food, nice wine. It's not good for everything. And so I think people, they're looking for, much like my father, who debated the idea of moving from the United States to New Zealand about 25 years ago. Back then it was back up the truck, sell everything we own, move it to New Zealand, and we're starting a whole new life. Now it's, I'm going to live here. My company's going to be here. My banks are going to be here, here, and here. My customers are over here. And I think that what you don't want to do is condition yourself that you're looking for one new place. You're looking for a series of places that each offer the best. No one place is the best for anything. Singapore, for example, for me, overpriced, don't really want to live there. Not exactly my cup of tea as a place to live. Great place if you want your money stored and you want it to be rock solid. So put your money there and then go live somewhere else.
Yeah, sure.
So do you guys also help with because obviously finding a good solution for people is one thing, but actually carrying it out is a whole other. There's a lot of moving parts there, right? So do you guys take it the one step further and say, hey, we're going to find the right fit for you, but we're also going to help you get all of these pieces in place and at least teach you how to use them together before we kind of set you off into the wild?
Yeah, we've been improving that over the years. I think now we're pretty good at it.
Okay.
I think now we're really good at it. We've got to where we're, number one, we spent about a month creating a plan with someone through a series of different phone calls. I brought in some of my senior team members now because I have some really smart people on the team, and they'll step in. Most of my senior team members are actually women, so it kind of works to kind of give a different perspective, and people share different information with them they might not share with me. And so we've really found that that's a nice balance. So we'll spend about a month creating the plan over 5-6 phone calls and some emails back and forth. From there, obviously, yeah, you do want to execute it. I'm a big believer in execution. What I've tried to do is basically say, all right, we'll walk with you for a year. It's not going to take a year to do it unless you're slow and helping me with some stuff, signing documents, whatever. We'll try and handle as much of the paperwork collection and that for you. And then as we go, if there's questions about, well, hold on, this banker asked me a question, what do I say? Then we'll work through that with you. Obviously, there's no perfect system.
Sure.
What I tell everyone to expect is a few hiccups. Most of the hiccups that we see are pretty expected from my perspective. But I understand that when people are first going out and doing it, it can be really weird to have a bank ask you some questions. Because if you're used to the Chase Bank, in Tempe, Arizona, then they don't. It's a different perspective when you go somewhere else. It's not better. It's not worse. I mean, it is better, I think, but it's just different.
Right.
And so that's what we do. So it is execution, and I've spent really 13 years going all around finding people who are good, finding people who aren't so good, finding people who are good for certain things but not others, and plugging that in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you help people with this process, but the first step, what's the first step in establishing a second citizenship?
Well, there's everyone's at a different first step. One thing that I think, just from a general nomad capitalist standpoint, a good first step for people to do is to go and open a bank account somewhere else, because it's relatively easy. There are some banks that will let you open it without going there. There are some banks right now, if you can open them through power of attorney due to COVID. And so you don't have to go there through that reason, but generally they want someone to go in. Or in normal conditions, you just go into the bank, and sometimes it takes a day or two, you get an account. And the reason why I think that's a great first step for everybody is because if you find a bank in an emerging economy like an Ecuador, a Georgia, an Armenia, there are some others, I guess their list is always shrinking, Ukraine, Belarus, you can open an account in a day or two and put whatever money you're comfortable in, and then you can go and track it online. You can go and use the ATM card, and there may be a reporting requirement depending on how much you put in your country. We're not trying to hide money from the tax man.
Right.
You will see, a month later, 6 months later, 12 months later, that money is still there. And so when it comes to all the other steps in the plan, one thing I've told people when I've talked to the people in the government of Georgia, for example, I did a lot of promotion of their banking sector and telling people to come to the country. And my premise was, the guy puts $1,000 in a bank account. Now it's on his mind. Now you're on his mind, and he's going to keep coming back because he likes the country, likes the people, likes the food, likes the great wine. And we have people who have said, yeah, my third trip, about a $250,000 apartment, and I'm renting it out. And I think there's a great progression there that speaks to the human side of what it takes to kind of dip your toe into this. Sure. When it comes to getting a second citizenship, per your question, there's a couple different ways to do it. And so the way that is the best for you depends on what you would do first. So if you've got a parent, grandparent, great-grandparent from some other country, oftentimes in Europe, but also like Mexico, for example, or if you've got a spouse or a child even, you may be entitled to another passport either very quickly by living there or just without living there. So if you have an Irish grandparent, you can become an Irish citizen. No need to do anything else unless you want to further diversify beyond Ireland. If you don't have that luxury, then the first thing to do would be to consider, okay, what's my reason for doing it? Am I doing it because I'm going to have an immediate tax savings? I am no longer a U.S. citizen. My reasons were more personal, but obviously having talked about my process of renunciation from a strategic and an emotional point of view, a lot of people come to me now who want to do that. Sometimes their motives are more tax motivated than mine are. And so, for them, going to one of these islands in the Caribbean, paying $100,000, 6 months later, they have the ability to leave the U.S. for good. That might save them $1 million the first year. And so that would be a good first step, rather than my friend who I helped get an Italian passport. It took him 3.5 years of bureaucracy. So it still had been a good investment for him to say, well, my reason is I'm looking to save money because my country's chasing me down. I don't even live here and they want my money. But, you might also say, I'm going to go and set up residence in the country. You might go and invest in real estate. You get a residence permit. That leads to citizenship in 5 years. There are some countries that have what I call paper residence. You spend 2 weeks a year there. You spend 1 day a year there. You spend 1 day every 6 months there. And that keeps your residence active. And unlike the US or the UK or Australia, they don't require you to live there 273 days a year for 6 years to become a citizen. They just require you to have been a resident for 5 years. Yeah. Maybe you've got a language, maybe you don't, but then you can apply for your citizenship. So there's so many different ways to do it. And it really comes down to what's the objective. Obviously, my people that I'm working with are largely looking at finances and improving their quality of life and improving their freedom and their options.
Yeah. Quick, those are all great points. And, as you're trying to, get offshore and do that, there's literally 1,000 ways you can slice that. Me and my wife, when we had our daughter, we almost had her in Brazil.
Yeah.
Speaks Portuguese. But the big hiccup we hit, so we have 4 kiddos, and my oldest son was 8 at the time, or 8.5, and he wouldn't have gotten citizenship. Me and my wife and all 3 of my other kids, because they were under the age of 8, would have gotten citizenship except for him. And so that was kind of the no-go for us. It was kind of a bummer. We have friends in Brazil, and we were, had a place lined up to stay and, do the whole thing, and we would all been, Brazilian passports, and he wouldn't have gotten one. It's a weird, that's the rules.
The other thing you can do if you're having kids, is if, kids born in the United States are U.S. citizens by default. If you're an American and you have a kid somewhere else, you can go to the embassy and you can file a consular report of a birth abroad, and you can get that child U.S. citizenship. Of course,
right.
For parents, right? Just because you're born overseas doesn't mean you're not American. Or Canadian or Dutch or whatever else.
Yeah.
But, if you go to most of these American countries, as in the Americas, you can give birth there on the soil and your child will become a citizen of that country. And in some cases, you as the parent get a fast track to becoming a citizen as well.
Yeah.
There may or may not be tax consequences to what's required for that. But, what's interesting, again, just the different cultures of countries. I've talked to people in Brazil about this, and people aren't really opposed to it the way they are in the U.S. or Canada, where they feel like people are taking advantage. Right. Nobody in a lot of these other countries seems to. In fact, sometimes I think they kind of feel very nice about it, that people want to come there and use their hospitals and be part of their culture. So that's an opportunity for new parents.
Yeah, that was very cool. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, it seems like it, obviously I haven't done extensive research on getting citizenship in other countries, but it seems like it is much easier than, probably the average person would have thought, just initially thinking about it. For any of our listeners who might be thinking like, hey, is this for me? Or yes, I have thought about at least escaping California. What are probably some of the first things people should start asking themselves? Like, what are some hurdles that you have to get over? What are you willing to give up? What are kind of your things that you walk people through on, like, hey, if you're going to do this, these are the things that we're going to have to dedicate ourselves to?
Well, I don't know that getting a second citizenship requires a lot of compromise. Again, if you're going to go and live somewhere, if you're going to go live in Germany for the next 8 years and learn German, that's obviously a compromise. I generally don't deal with that. And so I think the first question you have to ask yourself is, number one, where do I want to live? Do I think that where I live now is always where I'm going to want to live? And number two, am I at the point in my life where I can benefit from an insurance policy? We do help people who are younger or just starting out with cheaper insurance policies in this $100,000 donation. There are places where you might go and put $50,000 in government bonds. There are other places where you might just prove your income. Yes, I make $3,000 a month. Here it is. They'll give you a residence permit. Maybe you have to spend time in the country a couple of years from now. Maybe it's a call option. But I think that if you're a successful person, you've got to look around and say, what's the future in this country? Because you're mentioning wealth taxes, higher income taxes. You've got $26 trillion in debt now in the United States. Other countries are following suit. Someone's going to pay that bill. And I can tell you, the one thing about the United States in particular is they are not very egalitarian about it in the way that some Scandinavian societies are, where everyone agrees to chip in. Half the country will continue to pay nothing and get more rebates, and everyone else will be expected to pay more because billionaires shouldn't exist. Then don't shop on Amazon, don't buy an iPhone, don't do whatever. But that goes over like a Led Zeppelin with these people. So you'll just be paying. And so what I suggest is, if you're looking at a second citizenship, do I think that the country I'm in is going to respect my freedom and my wealth for the rest of my life? And if not, I look at like buying car insurance. Sure. Now, if you're going to actively live overseas and you're thinking, let me, diversify with a second citizenship, then I think that the conversation there is, if you're single, it's a relatively easy conversation. You commit to, let me try this for a year and see what happens. If you hate it, I guess it's not for you. You come back, you pay the, 56%. I think, kind of getting yourself into a mindset of let me try this for a year and giving yourself an out and being able to save face is good. If you're married, you really need to have a conversation and make sure you're on the same page. And I've had a lot more couples who are on the same page recently, but obviously historically, it's a situation where sometimes, one person in the relationship is more limited or one person doesn't want to go at all. And I think you have to make some decisions about that. If you're married, obviously it's tougher. I've had guys, they have a girlfriend and they've sometimes, been on the phone crying with me that she doesn't want to go or she can't go or this or that. And they're giving up on their dream to see the world and to make the most of their business. And sometimes they go back to the girlfriend. And I'm not going to judge what's right for them, but to me, I think that you have to make some tough decisions about what it is that you want. And I think so many people sacrifice what it is that they really want because they think it's not appropriate. They've been told not to focus on that. And I think a lot of people could be living a better life if they simply went where they were treated best.
Yeah. I'll definitely breach that conversation with my wife about if we want to bounce out of here, but I might wait until, she's going to have a baby any day now. So I might wait until after that event, I did tell her, I was like, you have to wait until at least after the 18th. So
it's not too late to go to Brazil though.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. And last minute tickets are cheap right now. So,
well, yeah, obviously it's a weird situation, but, I think it's a good conversation to have. And I also think that there's a way to ease into things. I talked to a family recently. They've got 6 people. So their approach is going to be a little bit different than what I did when I started out. And so in their case, it's, we're looking at this as the long term. One thing I love about other cultures, particularly Asian cultures, is they're looking at the long term. Just talked to a couple of guys from Hong Kong yesterday. Mm-hmm. Everything is my 10 and 20-year plan. And so what this family of 6, for example, was telling me is, let's spend the next year and a half exploring and seeing where we feel comfortable and not rushing into it. And we understand that as we transition away from our business here on the ground, we're not going to really get all the tax savings now, but we're building the bridge. And I'm seeing more of that recently. I think with better and better people is they're willing to put in that time and say, it's like anything in business. You're investing in your business now into a plant or into equipment or whatever. You're not selling it tomorrow. And there's going to be costs. And I think that's the other question to ask yourself is, if you can save yourself $1 million in taxes, I'm certainly not the cheapest guy to work with, but we do take that global holistic view. It might cost you $50,000. And, it's never fun to pay $50,000.
Yeah.
But you're going to get the money back slowly over time. And so I think those are the things that you need to ask yourself. And I think you need to understand kind of what's the long-term plan and seeing that as well.
Yeah. I do want to kind of shift gears just a little bit. You kind of did just mention Hong Kong. And so we are here, mid to late 2020. And Hong Kong's been in a massive upheaval for about the last, 9 months, 10 months, I guess, going on now. How is that trying to change that Asian landscape a little bit? And, is that kind of started to shift dollars out of Hong Kong and into Singapore and other places? Or, that's kind of it's not something nobody saw coming a year ago.
Yeah, perhaps. I think in a sense, part of what I do is I look at shattering misconceptions. The United States is a superpower. They exert a lot of control over things in the world. China obviously has been emerging in that role. I think that to a certain extent, having that in your life as a hedge, particularly from the United States and the West, is not the worst thing in the world to do. And if you look at Hong Kong, for example, their offshore tax system has been largely unaffected, I think, because they have the backing of China that Barbados, for example, does not have. And they were able to offer more favorable conditions to people who invest there. Obviously, some people are concerned about it. And I think that, from my perspective, I don't always go into the strategy of it in cases like this or my opinion on it, because I think that you have to do what feels comfortable for you. And I can push and I can prod. This is why we've expanded our process over the years. It used to be, you talk to me a couple times, here's your plan. We'd still do the global holistic thing, but we missed a lot of the human pieces. That comes from constantly talking to people, having a different voice talk to you that you're more comfortable with. Sometimes guys talk to me, I'll renounce, I'm throwing I'll send millions, what do you want? And then they talk to Jovan on my team, let's just start with $20,000, right? I'll stay in the U.S. And that's great because it's like we're getting what people really want. And so if you feel uncomfortable, having a company in Hong Kong or spending time in Hong Kong, I don't know that I ever recommended people live in Hong Kong. It's expensive and there's really no need to do it. But, if you feel uncomfortable with what's going on, I would go with that. Whether I agree or not, it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
You're not going to feel at peace about that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that's part of it. Thinking that this is not, and again, most people we work, it's men, it's couples, 92% of our YouTube audience is men, for example. As men, I think we often want to make everything logical. I was just talking to a couple yesterday and I'm trying to stress test, where they want to bank. And I'm saying, okay, let's imagine tomorrow we found the bank and now the rubber meets the road. You got to send $100,000 from your bank in the US to this bank. How do you feel? What's the guy say? That seems all right to me. And what's the woman say? I feel a little anxiety. Okay, let's work through that. Because seems okay is not a feeling. Right. I want to know your feeling. What do you feel about Hong Kong? What do you feel about this? And I don't think as men, we often talk about that enough. Sure. But let's be honest. We still have feelings and they still dictate, how we approach things in our life. And I think that has to be addressed.
Yeah. Good point.
So I mean, I guess wrapping back into the services you offer to people, where do people go? I mean, let's plug the book again. Hold up the book. Where do people start this journey of talking about the Nomad Capitalist and how it pairs with their feelings, right? Like where do they start unfolding, all this?
Well, the book, just for those listening, the book is called Nomad Capitalist. It's on Amazon. I wrote it over the course of 2 years, and it's a primer to everything that's possible in the industry that we are in. It's not certainly a how-to guide for how to do transfer pricing between your BVI and Canadian subsidiaries. US,
that's a good read too.
Yeah, that sounds like a page turner. I mean,
that's like the Seinfeld episode with George reading Risk Management. You're an expert in risk management. So I think where people should start is the book, because it's laid out. You don't have to watch 1,000 videos. You don't have to read 2,000 blog posts that I've written over the years, 7 years of doing this. And the book nicely summarizes it and talks about the opportunities. I think you need to connect with your why. I think anytime you want to accomplish something, what is the why? Why are you interested in this? Why are you doing this? You did not just get a hunger pang for getting a second passport yesterday, or for wanting to lower your taxes. What's the reason? And I think just saying, well, I want to lower my taxes, or just being, I'm angry about it, it's not enough. There has to be something that you want to run to. I want to run to having a tax rate under 10% so that I can reinvest more money in my company, hire more people, make a bigger impact, sell the company, keep more of that, ensure my generational wealth, do philanthropy, contribute to causes that are important to me. I mean, take it further and further. There's kind of a psychological tactic of asking a question and then you give the answer. Okay, why? Mm-hmm. Answer, why? Okay, why? And only when you start kind of repeating yourself and going in a loop have you really reached the depths of it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what people have to really examine, is asking themselves that. The same thing that you have to ask, why am I getting out of debt? Right. Why am I starting a business? What is the reason for this? I want to be free. I don't want to have a boss. I don't want people telling me what to do. Okay, well, how do we apply that to the same stuff that we're talking about here?
Yeah,
no, absolutely. I think those are all really good points. Yeah. Sorry, Mark, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, yes, it does kind of, there is such a common thread amongst, all the, people we've talked to either on the show or in business or anyone who has that entrepreneurial spirit. It does always come down to, the chiropractor didn't want to be a chiropractor because he was fascinated with backs, right? I mean, there was something else going on, or we had another one of our more fascinating guests, I think, who started a enteral formula company, and it was a nutritionally dense enteral formula, and it was because she had a child with special needs that she wanted to take hiking because she wanted because she wanted her daughter to not be a burden to her brothers. There's just so much more to it. I think going back to that why, it does kind of drive the question on like, hey, why do you want to even get out of the U.S., right? I mean, maybe you don't want to get out of the U.S. and this is a bad plan for you. Maybe you should stay put.
I agree.
Yeah.
No, I agree. And I think that's been the maturity. The thing that we all go through in life is letting everyone else have their own plan. I have family who lives in the United States. That's what works for them. Obviously, I think what you shouldn't accept is people in your family, your friends, shaming you or trying to tell you what to do or trying to tell you that you're stupid for doing it. I think far too many people, they live to please others in a way. I mean, I like to see others win. Again, I think the great philosophy that we talked about before was winners want other people to win. Mm-hmm. I want people to be successful. I like watching that. But I also don't want everyone to win by having control over me and causing me to lose. I want mutual win.
Yeah.
And so, I think everyone has a right thing for them. But again, my point is, what's right for you in the context of a full body of knowledge?
Yeah.
They have beaches outside of California. They have beautiful women outside of California. They have nice restaurants outside of California. Everything that you want from a certain place can be replicated somewhere else. And, when you get to the point of the ad hominem attacks where, those dumb Mexicans. Listen, Mexico to me is a lot of freedom, beautiful culture, amazing food. You want cities, you want mountains, you want beaches, you want it all. You've got amazing people. And you can find that in a lot of places in the world. And yet so many people are using defensiveness to stop themselves from doing that. And then they're going home and listening to what, their mom wants them to do and living her life. And I don't think it's a recipe for success.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's why you started a business. And I don't think it's why you decided to be different. And I don't know why you do it now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's absolutely. Well, I think that is a, because we can kind of wrap up here. I think that's a great, great point to end on too. If people want to find you, want to ask questions, want to start going down this journey, plug the website, where should people be going?
Well, so the book Nomad Capitalist on Amazon, it's $10 or something, right? And again, obviously, there's a difference in a $10 book and a consulting plan. Mm-hmm. What I try to do is put out a lot of free information to help people understand this. Okay. A lot of it is strategic, how to get this passport, how to set up a company here. Some of it also has this more psychological, human approach that I talk about, which I think we are unique in talking about because I believe it's important. And having lived this, I'm just a guy selling passports, some Swiss guy selling passports who doesn't need any other passports, but he'll sell you a second passport.
Out of his 1992 Saturn. Yeah.
Well, probably that, but so I blend that in. I think that we have youtube.com/Nomad Capitalist. Nomadcapitalist.com is the website. And you can just go through the content and find what speaks to you and see what's going on. And if you think it's a fit, generally the people that we're working with, are 7, 8, 9-figure entrepreneurs. So that means, you're making at least $500,000 a year, up to, whatever. We've had people all the way up the food chain, people who have exited companies, people who are investors in things like crypto or day traders. We had a couple of those. So if that's you, then you can go to the website, you can click on our little client button, and we have a whole process where we want to get to know what your objectives are and why you're doing this. We want to make sure you're a good fit, because I think that what's different about what we do, we have a lot of wealthy people who've come and said, I hired the Big Four and it didn't feel real to me. And I imagine that, I've known people who've worked at the Big Four, and some of our suppliers used to work at the Big Four and they got out. And, it becomes a little soulless just helping some big corporation save on taxes. Mm-hmm. For me, it's about a life change. It's about more freedom. It's about more options. It's about more money to do the things that are important for you. For me, I've been more charitable, by not giving my money to the U.S. government. I've been able to be more charitable and expand that. So for me, I want to know that people who are doing this want to have a better life, and it's not a bean counting exercise.
Right. Yeah.
And that's important to me. And as a boutique, guy who works with, 10 or 12 people a month, I want to enjoy it too. And I want to see people really getting it done.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Perfect.
Well, awesome. You can get a hold of Andrew and his team, nomadcapitalist.com. Make sure you hit up his book again. If you hold that up one more time, Andrew, show everybody. You got a copy of it there.
This is the book. It's now I'm like the guy I used to be in the infomercial. I used to help people place their radio infomercials. Now I'm like in the TV infomercial. This is the book. and it's just $19.95. It's not in the stores. You can get it on Amazon, and 260 some pages of introduction to all this stuff.
Yeah, well, make sure you get that. That's a good place to start, and then check out his YouTube channel, YouTube/Nomad Capitalist, and get yourself educated, and then head on over the website and fill it out and get to work. Get to being a nomad. That's exciting stuff. Okay, last two questions, Mark. Yeah. I'll say one, and you can say the very last one. But okay, so you talked about some of them already, but what are the most popular destinations, at least currently in today's day and age, that people are either getting second passports to, or that second residence, or setting up banking relationships? Kind of what's the top 5, I guess?
It really is all over the map. So I'll just go through a couple of things. I mean, banking, obviously, places like Singapore, I think a lot of wealth is moving to Asia because countries in Europe have become increasingly difficult, especially if you're an American, very difficult. I mean, as a former American, a lot of banks in Switzerland don't want to talk to me. Even if you get accepted, there's a lot of rules. If you don't have as much money and trying to dip a toe in, I mentioned the Ecuadors, Georgia's, Armenia is a big one. I like the Armenians. Those are good places to start. For countries, I have homes in 5 different cities right now. So I'll say the places that I think are good, which is Malaysia, Georgia, Colombia, Belgrade, or Serbia, Montenegro. I'll make sure I didn't forget it. Those are good places to live. There are many others, by the way. A lot of people like Portugal. A lot of people are going to Mexico. In terms of second passports, again, I mean, if it's from your ancestry, the options are endless. I have a lot of people who are doing these Caribbean citizenship by investment programs now because they just want to be done. They want to have their options. They want to have their backup plan. They want to be able to do what they were, there's a sense of freedom. The first time I got a second passport and I got it and I was looking at it, I'm like, now I feel like I have options. It's not theoretical anymore.
Right. So it's the real thing.
Going to St. Lucia, I'm a St. Lucian or Antigua or whatever else, and they're just saying, let's do that. But there are many others. So, I mean, there's really, the number of permutations. The people that we work with, we do inherently do some of the same things over and over. I became known as Mr. Georgia a while ago. I'm not doing nearly as much stuff in Georgia now. But, the kind of people we worked with at the time, it suited a lot of their requirements, right? Now we have a more diverse group and there's more countries available and some, countries rise and fall. But, there's so many permutations out there.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah.
Well, last question. I think this might be the most important question we ask in all of our 2 episodes. We didn't have the pleasure of doing this in person, or you'd be able to tell that I am a bit of a foodie based on my physique. If I am, looking for best food, like your favorite country's food, where am I booking a flight?
My wife and I, Mrs. H, and I, we talk about this because she likes to cook, and there's 3 that stand out to me. So Georgia's one of them, which is off the radar, and it's so interesting and it's so exotic to most people. You've got some of the most amazing food, and they were the birthplace of wine. They have amazing wines. You can try a Kinsmorali wine if you like something that's a semi-sweet red. Very hard to find those. There's a lot of like Akasheni, more dry wines. So amazing food in Georgia. Mexico, I think, probably one of the best food cultures in the world, more familiar to folks in the United States. But obviously, despite the fact that one of the few things I miss about the U.S. is the occasional late night Taco Bell drive-through run, that ain't real Mexican food. So
true, it is not.
City. I'm still embarrassed because when I was I bought a house in Colombia last November, and the month before we were in Mexico City, and we were hitting up these street taco carts, and got a little pudgy, quite frankly. The food is so good, and you have it's like if you go to Polanco in Mexico City, you've got incredible steakhouses. We went to Aries Steakhouse, for example, just incredible. And then Malaysia, I think, is also good because you've got a confluence of numerous different cultures, from the Middle Eastern to the Indian to the Chinese to the Malay culture. Went to a restaurant called the Kabaya Dining Room in Penang last weekend. One of the best restaurants in the world, in my opinion. Not expensive at all, by the way. Amazing vibe. So those are 3 countries that I personally like. I think that you'll do very well there.
Well, what do you eat in Georgia? I just gotta know.
If you come up with a passport by food, I'm in, right?
A food passport, yeah.
Yes. What are they food? Yeah. Okay. I gotta know.
So what's that, Josh?
What do they serve in Georgia that's so good? Is it just the whole experience, or?
Well, so they have the Georgian Supra, and so I'll do this now. We had a party of about 12 people here recently, and a couple of them were like Ukrainian or Russian, so they understood, but the others didn't understand. There's 12 common Georgian toasts. but there's actually many more toasts. And by the end of the night, you'll have some guys, they'll drink 2 or 3 liters of wine, and they'll just be toasting. It'll be incredible. And I mean, you've got you've got vegetarian dishes, you got kali, you've got these kind of bread boats you might have seen, egg and cheese in kind of inside. You've got kind of what looks like pizzas, like they're called hachapuri. So there's different kinds of hachapuri from different regions. You've got kebabs, you've got minced beef, you've got you've got chicken salads, you've got lamb, you've got I'm missing so many things. I mean, it's just endless. You can just go and everything's fantastic.
Love it.
Well, it's 10 p.m. here, and I'm going to go snacking. So
yeah, it's food time.
I'm ending my day.
Yeah. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. I know it's early in the morning there, and we just really appreciate it. This was great stuff. I know our listeners are really going to appreciate. Kind of any last closing thoughts? Anything you want to close with?
No, I listen. I think for me, keeping those 5 words, the 5 magic words, go where you're trading the best in mind, because there are so many threats in our business lives and our personal lives that are trying to take us away from that. People want us to do something that's in their best interest. I think that opening up yourself to realize that there are no sacred cows. Go where you're treated best does not care about how what you feel about the U.S. banks. It cares that they're not the best, and there's a better place to store your money, for example. And if you can put the strategy side together with the feeling side, I think, and break through some of these barriers, I think you will have incredible success. I've grown a lot as a person by doing this, because I've learned by being in different cultures more about myself, more about what my values are. I've improved a lot, grown faster. And I think you can grow as a person, as a business owner, by following these things and by being a little different.
Yeah. Good stuff. That's awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for being here. We're excited to get these episodes out and put it in. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day there in Malaysia.
And if you ever accidentally get caught in a layover in California, because that's probably the only time you'll ever be here for an extended period of time, let us know. We'll come by and say, we'll come grab you at the airport. We'll go get some wine or something in Napa before you get out of here. The Franchise Tax Board in California will find you.
I'll be getting letters from you.
They will tax you for the days that you were here too.
No doubt about it.
Yeah. Everybody, just remember, anything that's said here should not be taken as tax, legal, or financial advice. Please make sure you consult your professionals. If you have a good CPA, a good attorney, hit up the Nomad Capitalist. I'm sure they have a litany of great referrals to make sure this is all done correctly, and just make sure you do that. So, again, thanks for everybody, and thanks for listening. Have a great day.